I'm Lenora, your host for 3Ps in a Pod. My apologies for not putting out an episode last week, but I'm back. I was traveling a bit, and we're back. This is about purpose, pathways, and perspectives. I'm looking forward to this topic. I have a partner I work with on my podcast, and she was the one who helped me settle on what this topic was going to be about, and it's about re-entering the workforce. Be sure and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app so that you'll get notification every time a new episode goes live. And share an episode to anyone you think it will help. Thanks for listening. Here we go. Re-entering the workforce. Well, before I talk about re-entering the workforce, I'm going to talk a little bit about exiting the workforce when I had my son. I have 2 children. They're young adults now, full grown, on their own. And when I was becoming a mom, we made the choice, I was married at the time, we made the choice that we wanted me to spend the primary time at home as mom. I was excited about that, but I also remember when I was scheduling the change with my current boss at the time, and I was telling, I think it was my boss's boss, we were talking about the change for me to go home and be a full-time mom. And he said, that might be a challenge for you. I was honestly really surprised. And I asked him, why? And he said, well, you're pretty driven. You're kind of career focused. And that was nothing bad about that. But he wondered how I'd do with the shift. It really made me think. And I did have some struggles when I shifted and went home full time, because often when you have a job, and depending on your job, you may have a lot of deadlines you're meeting. You're with coworkers every day. You might be getting praise for the work you do. You're feeling good about what you're visibly producing. And then all of a sudden, whether you're running at a 75 mile an hour pace, or who knows what your pace is of work, and then you go to being full-time at home, it's a shift. I remember when I would be asked, hey, so what'd you do today? I almost felt like it was an attack or something. I'd think, I don't know why I haven't taken a shower yet, because I would feel guilty. What have I done today? Because being a mom is so different. And sometimes your day is blown from anything you think it's going to be. And you don't have coworkers around praising you for your efforts. You don't have always really clear things you can see that you've accomplished. And it depends on how you're wired. But it was a big shift for me. And my mom had been at home all the time growing up. So I loved that concept. I loved that she was always there for me that way. But I also had a little bit of concern after being home for a while, thinking, well, my life is now over. It's never going to ever be about anything I want again. Now, I wanted to be a mom. But as far as ambitions, things I wanted to accomplish on my own, I just didn't know how to adapt my mindset. Again, I wanted to be mom. I love being mom. But any shift takes some processing. And you have to examine your thinking. And I am glad that I, over time, found a really nice, balance between things that I got involved with, as well as really enjoying being a very involved mom. Now, I also did go back into the workforce a couple different times and then stepped out again. Sometimes because there was a layoff with some kind of good timing-ish, or it was a specific choice. But again, when I first had my son, I did leave the job. I was home for probably a good 6 months, and then went back to work part-time at an airline. And it worked out really well. The schedule was very flexible. What I did was reservation sales agent, because a lot of people did that same job. You could trade shifts really easily. It was really easy to be flexible. We just stuck with what our budget was, and was able to keep a very, very manageable schedule. But then again, when I had my second child, I let go of that job and was home for a couple years with the 2, and then went back into the workforce. So when I did go back into the workforce, the prompt was because we had financial needs. And we thought, okay, I think it's a time for me to step back in, start bringing in additional income. We had a business, but it just wasn't meeting everything we were looking to do. And so I made the shift to go back to work. Also, I should say, for this podcast, I asked my podcast business partner, Kathy, to put together some questions for this because she's so smart and it just helps me manage myself as I go through this topic. So the question was, what prompted me to go back to work? So again, this was a major shift when I went back to full-time work, and it was a financial need. So next question she asked was, how did you know what type of job is best for you as your re-entry to the job force? And then sub-question, should you take a lower paying job at a good company with the hopes of moving up in that company? And I want to start the answer with saying, you got to ask yourself, what do I want? I think some people go back to the workforce with really zealous too high of expectations, but to be honest, I think most people shoot too low. I don't really have data to support that, but I think that's what I've seen. I think some people shoot too low and you limit your own options. And I would have done that if it were not for a couple people. And one was a friend who used to work in the industry of helping people transition between companies. She'd also been a former vice president at a company that helped people gain jobs. So that's a great friend to have. Or it's good to ask people, by the way, about this process. Don't worry about having to figure everything out on your own. So what my friend did, again, was ask me, Lenore, what do you want? And she had to ask me that multiple times because, to be honest, I didn't think I'd get what I wanted. I was afraid to actually say what I wanted. What I sadly was doing was just thinking, well, what could I get? And I had a few different options and things I thought that I might be able to get. But she wanted me to answer the question, what do you want? And I had come to realize that I did have a desire to go into corporate training. I'd done a lot of public speaking, mostly, so many things on the volunteer level, but at very small and large capacities, and I love doing it. So what I wanted to do was to go into corporate training. And so she said, well, then why wouldn't you do that? And I said, well, I didn't think I could. I didn't think I really could get that. And I didn't have a degree. I assumed you'd have to have one. But she pushed me to create a resume that was specifically for corporate training. And that intimidated me at first because I was thinking, well, if I'm too narrow, I can't cast a net for all these other jobs maybe I could get. But she, thank God, looked at me like, Lenore, why do you think you can't get this? And I don't know, I'm just insecure. And I was really just insecure. So thank God for someone who pushed me. So what I did was the hard work, because it takes effort and it pushes you out of your comfort zone a bit, but actually do the work to put together a resume to fit what it is you actually want. Take some risks and do that. Now, after I did some work, put a resume together, had it reviewed, and I didn't, thank God, didn't even have to spend money on this. That's fine. If you need to invest in that, it's worth the investment. But I really did a lot of work on it, put quite a few hours into a good resume. And I'll do a separate episode just on that. But I want to just, again, talk about this process. Now, when I started looking for work and looking for jobs, I think at first shot too high, kind of assumed how much I could get. I went from being pretty insecure to thinking I could get quite the income at the very beginning. And I lost a couple of opportunities that way when I had some like pre-interviews. And I don't regret that because I was sorting things out. I remember one time somebody asked me what the minimum of what I needed to make was, and I really wasn't sure. But I decided to say something pretty high. And they said, well, we shouldn't really talk furthermore because there's no way I'm going to make you happy with what we have. And I was like, whoa, but, and I started to backpedal. And she was like, no, that just tells me this isn't going to work. It's not going to be a fit. That turned out to be a good experience. But I did also adjust. What do I actually need versus what I want? I wasn't going to shoot for the lowest thing out there, but I also wanted to temper it with what I thought maybe a little more balanced and feasible. Another time I did turn down the second interview when I got called back for a second interview because in my gut, I just couldn't accept the job for what they were posting it for. I wanted the job. It was interesting to me, but I thought I just can't do this. And I called and left a message and actually said, you know what? I'm really sorry. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to go ahead and cancel the second interview because I don't want to waste your time. I actually need to make more than this, and so I'm going to let you go so I don't take any more of your time. I really appreciate it. And then I also, though, said what it was at a minimum I was looking to make. Well, thankfully, I got a call back, and they were still interested and wanted to talk to me at a different rate. And we were able to work things out to get almost what I set as my very different request. So, what do you want? And then do some research and do what it takes to put together a resume targeted to what it is you want. And yes, it's also good if you can find a company that does allow you to move up. That's one thing you're going to want to find out in the interview. What is the culture like, or what you can read on their website or find out from others? Is this a kind of company that has a pathway upward? Because sometimes you do want to just get in the door and then take the next opportunity, which can come up pretty fast depending on the company if you're really doing excellent work. Next question. What are some tips for finding good jobs? In other words, job resources, word of mouth, training programs. I could mention several. Again, you want to do the work to get yourself prepared as best you can. You can continue to modify your resumes, but I'm telling you, make sure there's no spelling errors. One tip for you, if companies are getting a lot of resumes for a job, the quickest way to reduce the stack is find the typos and just toss the resume. Because if you're not going to get it right in a job interview, how excellent are you going to be on the job? So that may or may not be true, but it's the quickest way to reduce your stack when you're under pressure to hire. You have a lot of applicants and you need to narrow things down. It's one thing that people will do. So when you're entering the job force, definitely tell your friends. Let people know and come up with a concise few sentences about what it is you're looking for. That takes practice. All this takes effort. A few companies or websites that I recommend are Indeed.com, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn. Those are all good. If you don't have a profile on LinkedIn, create one. Don't treat it like Facebook. Keep it professional. Keep the communications professional. You probably also should scan your own social media pictures and stuff that you put out there, because some people search that. And if you look like you're someone who's angry all the time or is just who knows what, you might want to pay attention to what you got posted. That's up to you, but it's a good thought. I also recommend, when you know the sector or the area you want to pursue, read some articles about it. Again, there is so much information out there on the internet that if you do some research, you can help yourself be sharp to step back into the workforce. Again, you can also look at websites like Glassdoor, which can help with some information on what some companies may pay. They're not always accurate, but there may be some information out there. Some states have really nice resources for workforce, and some of them have done work to even talk about industries, what sectors may pay, at least a range of things, etc. Also, when you're thinking about what type of work you want to do, sometimes you have a desire for something, but if you do more research, you'll find out, well, what does that career actually require of you? I remember a friend in the past who shifted out of a sector because though she liked it, the schedule was so demanding. Long days all the time and projects, and it's just the nature of the beast. When you have a project, it's consuming. And the season of her life she was going into, she thought, I don't want this schedule anymore. She works hard, that's not a question, but she wanted something different. So she made the shift using the similar skills she had, but a very, very different sector. And that comes from doing some research, finding out how you can use your strengths with what's out there. Then once you have a good idea of what you want, I suggest requesting informational interviews from those who already have a job that you may want. You don't have to even necessarily know the people. If you come across sharp and you make a phone call, say, hey, you know what? I'm entering back into the workforce. I am very interested in this work. Can I get 20 minutes of your time to ask you some questions about this? I will do all the preparation. I will make sure I use good use of your time. Is there an opportunity for me to book 20 minutes with you over this next week? I'll make anything work. Things like that. You do some sharp prep and you use the time very well, because not only will you learn a lot if you read their website, ask questions, start learning, but sometimes those informational interviews turn into actual opportunities. Or they'll remember you later, make sure they have your contact information to follow up. So some good tips for finding jobs. Career fairs, if you have those out there, absolutely. Any of those things are good. Even if that particular event doesn't pay off for you, you'll be more ready for the next one. I'm one of those that believes many of the efforts you put out will pay off one way or another. Bottom line, you want to make the most of every opportunity. Something I've become convinced of is it's not actually that hard to stand out. It's just really easy not to. So do the work to be prepared as best as you know how, but make the most of every opportunity. It often can lead you to an open door. Next question. What were some obstacles I had to overcome on my resume or with interviews? In parentheses, handling the gap. Yeah, I had been home for a while, so sometimes people are afraid of, what do you do about that gap? A lot of times companies don't want a gap in work history. I was concerned about that when I was stepping back into the workforce, and I'd been home for several years. My friend, again, who had been coaching me, said, don't worry about it. To be honest, Lenora, a lot of people would really like a gap in their work history as a mom. So it's not like I was out there doing something illegal. I was at home raising my children. Now, we also did have a business on the side, and I did do some work for our business. So I could also share that though it was part-time, I was doing some work. I was doing some voiceover work, some content writing, things like that. But I did share, and we talked about the gap. But I explained, here's what I did. I went home, and I didn't talk about what I did as a mom. But they understood, and they actually didn't have any problem with it. You just need to be clear and just have confidence in what you were doing with your own life. All right, so of course you always want to be honest and also express your interest and enthusiasm to get back into the workforce. Now, an obstacle, or I don't know if it's an obstacle, but a thought that I have when I was working on my resume, because I was headed towards training. I wanted to do training. Now, I legitimately had 20 years of training experience. But here was my thought. If I put 20 years, that makes me sound older. I didn't know if that was an issue or not. So I decided to just say more than 15 years. Because then you might guess my age, and if you have any biases, I'm honest, it's more than 15 years, but I didn't have to say more than 20. So there you go. But make your resume look sharp, and just have other people review it, have them give you their opinion. Next question. How can someone accentuate their skills and experience to shine, even if they're a bit aged? These days, I say again, it comes back to research. Do some reading. When I went back into training, and I knew I was going to have to give a demonstration of training as a part of one of my interviews, I searched the internet, and I searched, what are the training trends right now? And I got a list of all kinds of things. Half of them I had not heard of before. So I did some more research. I looked up words and I read some articles. And then I could say, okay, at least I have my mind wrapped around what this actually means. And when you look at what something actually means, it's often not near as foreign as it sounds. It's just sometimes it's simply new terms for saying the same old thing. Other times it is new and it's a bit technical. And again, I was honest. Here's what I have experience with. Here's what I don't have experience with. But even being able to talk about it with current terms is a help. So another thing, in my case, I did not have a strong education section on my resume. So what I did, again, at the provoking of my friend, is I did the work to put together what's called career highlights, where you have to look at a situation, what actions you took, and what results you got. At first, you're really brain dumping about what you've done in your past. In fact, my friend said, I want you to write up 20 of these stories. I thought, are you kidding me? And she was not kidding. And I don't know if I did 20, but she wanted me to write down 20 ideas of what's possible. Where had I presented? What projects had I done? Just brainstorm ideas. And then out of that, you pick 5 or 10 and you write out more detail. What actually was the situation in detail? Again, this isn't to make it brief right now. Right now, you're getting the information out. You're writing down on whatever you write on, what the situation was, how many actions you took, and again, the results you got. That was a lot of work, but boy, did it pay off on getting resume looks when I did actually start applying. So what situation were you in at a past company? What actions did you take? What results did you get? I've talked with numerous people in their past that had no idea how much responsibility they really carried. They didn't recognize what they had actually accomplished. And so they couldn't sell themselves properly at all. A specific gal comes to mind that we used to work together. She was quite a bit younger than me. And she was a rock star. She just really did great work, and a lot of it. And then she was shifting to a different role or applying to it and updating her resume. She asked me to take a look at it, and I told her that she needed to put together some more detail on the project she had recently completed. She was surprised because she thought she had put out the basic information that was important. And I had to stop her and said, do you realize what you accomplished last year? She was like, I did this. I went, no, here's what you did. And I really laid it out for her. And she was shocked. She had accomplished a very impressive shift of a system for a large group of people. She had been almost single-handedly responsible for the success. It shouldn't have been set up that way. I think the project was not managed well from her leadership, but she was a rock star. She had really accomplished something, but she was taking it for granted. So I pushed her to write down some things and expand it. And it really made a difference in her, for one, seeing what she was capable of because she'd already done it, and to get really nice responses on people who would see what she's done. So again, you may jot down 20 ideas, narrow it down to your top 5 or 7, and then from there, really put the details out, and then you just begin to massage it and make it really concise, and narrow it down to 1 to 3 sentences. And that can be put on your resume. I recommend you look at some templates on the internet for resume examples. There's a lot out there. And the way it's laid out really also helps add to its attraction. Now, for some of these apps, you're just going to upload text and the formatting can be a little questionable. So I realize applying online can be different than the old school, just handing someone a paper resume. But I would still recommend take a resume with you when you go somewhere, a printed resume. And then, of course, on LinkedIn these days, you can have a sharp resume outline of what you've done, and that in itself can be used often to apply to a job. So there's all kinds of different ways, and don't be afraid of it. Just start getting a feel for it, start playing around with it, and then put the work in that you need, but you're more than capable. I want you to encourage yourself to talk yourself out of fear. You're just learning. You're stepping back into the workforce, and you have things to offer. So spend some time taking a look at that to increase your own confidence, and then practice so that you can sell yourself well. And that's really just sharing the real you. And if you really are wanting to do a great job, and you really like being a team player, you want to help your boss's job be easier, if you want to make an impact, etc., things like that, that's something companies look for. So don't undersell yourself if you're a quality person of integrity that's a hard worker. Trust me, that's needed. Next question. How did you manage change in the home when you started working again? Like managing children's schedules, food planning, pets, etc. Do I remember what I did? Let's see. I think the biggest thing you can always do is communicate. People don't read minds well. We may think, hey, you really know me, you should have known this. Yeah, well, they don't. I used to do that too, and it's not helpful. So you want to communicate, hey, I'm going to be headed back to work. I'm concerned about how we're going to get the same things done. I can use help in this area. Let's talk about how we can share some of the responsibilities. And hopefully you have a partner that is a reasonable human and will work with you. So communicate. Now, I'm not big at doing a lot of cooking, so I tend to make easier meals. So plan for things that make easy meals. Sometimes you're shifting to having your kids make lunch instead of you making it for them. And they're not going to do it maybe as cool as you do it, but they need to learn how to pick up the responsibilities. So that's a shift. All of that's a shift. And be nice to yourself, because just shifting the schedule and to this whole new environment you're going to be back into, the time, the commute, the new learning, it takes a while to adjust. So be nice to yourself. You probably will be tired for a while. So continue to communicate. And one of the last questions, what do you do to balance work life? Parentheses, spiritual, fitness, family, rest, etc. That's a whole nother conversation too. So I'll just say a couple thoughts. One, I think you have to realize that it is actually really a choice. It won't happen automatically. A friend of mine was talking to me lately about a saying, and it's actually a verse, and it was something like, in your patience, possess your own soul. And I could go a lot of different directions with that, but I think it's important that we say, how can I take responsibility for what's going on in my life? It is my life, so what can I do? I also think it's important to think long term. If you don't think long term, then you're not going to take care of yourself, most likely. You won't exercise, or at least do something more interesting to you that kind of fits in the category of exercise. If you aren't thinking long term, then you're not going to eat the better foods that are going to help you last longer than other foods might. I think you have to realize, ultimately, it's a choice. It takes work to balance things. If you think of balancing, like a balancing act, people practice a lot to do a balancing act. I haven't seen one of those for decades, but let's play pretend here. So don't try to be perfect, but do try out options. It might take you a while to find balance. With your spouse or significant other, are you going to have date nights? What matters more? Sometimes parents need to think about that. What matters more, that this area is clean or that I have time to play with my kids? I like things clean, but there's times I would come home and I would refuse to do more work. So I would think it's going to be fine, and I would go hang out with my family. And thankfully, they did work as well. I wasn't the only one assuming I needed to do everything. But I decided it was more important to me to hang out with them than to have something as organized as maybe I feel it should be. So what's your choice? What matters more to you? Taking a walk or watching another episode? It's a choice. In the end, it's your life. And find reasons to laugh. That's a healthy balance. One of the best ways to bring back some energy is find a reason to laugh. Lighten up on some things. Enjoy life on purpose. Find what you do like. What are you thankful for? What can you appreciate? Any of those things, do more of that. There's always things we could complain about. So let's get really good at what we can be thankful for. Balance takes some time. Whenever you're trying to balance, things can fall down. So that's okay. You just try a new way. So there you go. Some thoughts about entering back into the workforce. Believe in yourself. Your potential is greater than you think. Do the work. Do the research. Again, it's not that hard to stand out in all reality. It's just really easy not to. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to this podcast. Rate it on your favorite podcast app. Let me know what your thoughts are. You can connect with me on LenoraDiane.com. There's totally unrelated to this, blog articles. There's ways you can request by email to stay connected. And soon I'll have a free ebook to send you that's just an encouraging few pages. I hope you'll enjoy that as well. Thank you for listening to 3 Peas in a Pod.